Talking about money and spirituality in the same sentence can seem contradictory to many, can it? But the truth is, the Bible is filled with timeless principles about biblical wealth and how to manage our finances with divine wisdom. However, millions of people continue to struggle with money, feeling trapped in cycles of debt, anxiety, and frustration. But here is a powerful truth: God did not create you to live this way. Financial prosperity, according to the Bible, is not a myth or a taboo subject. It is a divine plan designed for His children to prosper. And no, we are not talking about a magic formula to get rich overnight. We are talking about how to earn money with biblical principles, applying eternal truths to our daily finances. Does that sound different from what you have been taught? Of course, it does. But that is what makes this topic so powerful. Today, we are going to walk through 7 biblical principles for prospering, each with practical teachings and inspiring examples directly from the Scriptures. These principles will not only change your relationship with money, but also your perspective on what prosperity truly means. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications so you don't miss any content that can transform your life. And I warn you, the last principle is a key that few people know, but that can completely revolutionize your financial life. Wealth, according to the Bible, does not begin with numbers but with a heart aligned with divine purpose. Honoring God with our finances is not simply an act of obedience, it is a demonstration of trust. When someone separates the first fruits and the tithe, they are acknowledging that everything they possess comes from Him. This principle is not just a religious act but a spiritual key to financial prosperity. Abel understood this clearly when he presented the best of his harvest, while Cain simply complied with the minimum. In practice, many people feel they do not have enough to give to God, but that thought reveals a scarcity mindset. Honoring God with finances is not about the amount that is given, but about the disposition of the heart. When we separate the first part for Him, we demonstrate that we trust in His continuous provision. This is where faith is tested and, at the same time, strengthened. There are those who constantly struggle with financial problems, and the root is often in not applying this basic principle. God's plan for financial prosperity includes a constant flow of provision, but this flow is activated with obedience and generosity. The example of Abel reminds us that God looks beyond the offering itself. He observes the intention behind it. This principle is not a magic trick to get more money, but a spiritual law that opens the windows of heaven. Biblical wisdom teaches us that true prosperity begins with the right priority. And what is that priority? Putting God first in everything, including our finances. The path to financial prosperity, according to the Bible, is not paved with empty promises or magic formulas, but with hard work and diligence. God honors effort, discipline, and a daily commitment to our responsibilities. Joseph, a young man sold as a slave, did not let his situation define his future. He worked with excellence in every opportunity, and his diligence took him from prison to the palace. That is the essence of God's wisdom for finances, working as if every task were for God Himself. However, many desire results without the necessary sacrifice. It is not enough to pray for opportunities if, when they arrive, we let them pass due to laziness or lack of commitment. The Bible is clear: the soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, but the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. Wealth does not come to those who wait sitting down, but to those who get up every day with a clear purpose and work with passion and dedication. It is easy to get discouraged when hard work does not seem to yield immediate fruits, But that is where faith comes into action. Every small effort, every extra hour, every task done with love and dedication are seeds planted in fertile ground. God is not unjust to forget the work of His children. How to earn money with biblical principles implies understanding that success is a combination of faith, effort, and persistence. Diligent work not only generates income but also builds character. People who prosper do not just accumulate resources, they build a mindset of growth and responsibility. God's plan for prosperity includes constant effort, work ethic, and the certainty that He rewards those who do not give up. Because in the end, success is not only what we obtain but who we become in the process. Wisdom for finances is not just a spiritual concept. It is a practical tool for managing resources with responsibility and vision. Solomon, the wisest man in the Bible, understood the importance of planning before acting. Many economic problems are not the result of a lack of resources, but of poor administration. God's plan for freedom includes a wise management of every cent that comes into our hands. It's not just about how much you earn, but how you use what you receive. Financial disorder is one of the greatest enemies of prosperity. Spending without control, getting into unnecessary debt, and not having a clear plan are sure paths to economic failure. The Bible teaches that the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. True financial prosperity, according to the Bible, begins with something as simple as creating a budget and being faithful to it. Saving, investing wisely, and avoiding impulsive expenses are habits that lead to success. It is not necessary to have a large income to start planning. Even small amounts can multiply when managed with wisdom. Wealth, according to God, does not arise from a stroke of luck but from conscious and consistent decisions. Every step counts, from avoiding unnecessary expenses to learning to say no to impulsive purchases. Because financial discipline not only improves your resources, but brings peace and stability to your home. Financial planning does not mean living in fear or with a scarcity mindset. On the contrary, it means being a good steward of what God has placed in your hands. Christian financial wisdom teaches that every resource has a purpose and must be used with responsibility. It is not a matter of having more, but of being faithful with what you already have. Thus, the doors of divine provision open, and abundance flows naturally. If you need prayer support for your finances, your economic decisions, or any area of your life, leave your request in the comments. We believe that God has the power to bring clarity, direction, and provision in every situation. Debts are like invisible chains that bind not only finances, but also the mind and spirit. Financial freedom, according to the Bible, clearly warns about the dangers of living in debt. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Many begin with small credit purchases, thinking they will pay them off quickly, but soon find themselves trapped in an endless cycle of payments, interest, and anxiety. God did not design His children to live under the weight of debt, but in financial freedom. However, it is not enough to avoid new debts. It is necessary to face the existing ones with a clear plan. The story of the widow who came to the prophet Elisha is a perfect example. She was on the verge of losing everything, but she obeyed the divine instructions, worked with what she had at hand, and saw a financial miracle. God's wisdom teaches that getting out of debt is not just a matter of money, but also of obedience and faith. The problem is not credit itself, but the relationship we develop with it. Using loans to cover desires instead of needs, or to project a lifestyle we cannot sustain is a recipe for disaster. Wealth is never built on the unstable sand of debt, but on the solid rock of wise administration. Every financial decision must be evaluated with skill and prayer. Getting out of debt does not happen overnight, but every small step counts. God's plan for abundance includes discipline, commitment, and the willingness to adjust consumption habits. Living free from debt does not mean living in poverty, but living with peace. When debts cease to be a burden, the heart and mind are free to dream, plan, and grow in all areas of life. Now that we understand the importance of avoiding debt and planning with wisdom, it is time to talk about one of the least valued but most powerful keys to financial prosperity according to the Bible: contentment and gratitude. We live in a society that constantly pushes us to want more, to compare ourselves with others, and to feel that we never have enough. However, the Apostle Paul taught us an eternal principle: I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Christian financial wisdom does not begin with a bulky bank account, but with a grateful heart. The problem is not having ambitions. The problem is never being satisfied. Many pursue riches thinking that money will solve all their problems, but they end up trapped in a race without end. Biblical wealth is not at odds with material success, but it warns us that the love of money is the root of many evils. Contentment does not mean conformity, it means peace in the process. It is understanding that God is in control and that every stage has a purpose. Gratitude has a transformative power. When we stop focusing on what is missing and begin to be thankful for what we already have, something changes within us. God's wisdom teaches us that a grateful heart is a magnet for blessings. Complaining closes doors, gratitude opens them. Even in the most difficult moments, there is always something for which to give thanks. Learning to be content does not mean stop dreaming or striving, but enjoying the process as we advance. Spiritual and financial prosperity begins with gratitude and is strengthened with contentment. The most prosperous people are not those who have the most things, but those who have a full heart. Gratitude does not change our situation immediately, but it changes our perspective, and that transforms everything. When we declare gratitude, we are not only aligning our hearts with the will of God, but also activating a spiritual principle that attracts divine provision. Writing a declaration of gratitude is more than words. It is an act of faith that breaks invisible barriers and opens doors that seemed closed. Write in the comments, "I live in gratitude, and God prospers my finances." By doing so, you will be declaring a powerful truth over your life and activating a spiritual principle that can bring surprising results. Biblical wealth is not just about receiving, but also about giving. Generosity is a powerful principle that activates divine provision in our lives. Jesus himself said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." However, we live in a world where giving is often seen as a loss instead of a spiritual investment. The truth is that when we give, we not only bless others, but we open a door for God to pour even more resources into our hands. The young man who gave his 5 loaves and 2 fishes to the Lord might have thought, "This is not enough to feed everyone." But in the hands of Jesus, that small act of generosity was multiplied to satisfy a multitude. This is how divine direction for finances works. When we give with a willing heart, God multiplies what remains. The act of giving does not depend on the amount we have, but on the disposition with which we do it. Generosity is not always related to money. One can be generous with time, talents, and resources. But when we talk about financial prosperity, it is clear that money is also a tool to bless others. Every time you help someone in need, support a ministry, or sow into a project that glorifies God, you are participating in a spiritual principle that transcends the material. We should not give out of obligation or with the expectation of receiving something in return, but with a cheerful and detached heart. Christian financial wisdom teaches that giving is a privilege, not a burden. When we understand this, our hands stop clinging to what we have, and God can fill them with more. Because in the end, it is not just about accumulating, but about being channels of blessing for others. No one builds financial prosperity according to the Bible in isolation. Even the most successful characters in the Scriptures sought counsel and guidance at key moments in their lives. Moses, despite being a powerful leader chosen by God, listened to the advice of Jethro to better organize his responsibilities. This act of humility not only eased his burden, but also improved the well-being of the entire people of Israel. God's wisdom teaches us that there is power in surrounding ourselves with people with experience and perspective. In financial life, making impulsive decisions can have lasting consequences. Many lose resources for not asking for guidance in time, whether in investments, savings, or daily administration. The right advice can be the difference between success and failure. It is not just about seeking financial experts, but about finding people with values aligned with biblical principles. Biblical wealth is not built by following any voice, but those that reflect the will of God. Seeking advice is not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. We live in an era where information is at our fingertips, but not all information is reliable. That is why God's plan for financial prosperity includes listening to mentors with solid principles. How can you identify a good counselor? Look for someone who not only has material success, but who lives with integrity and fear of God. Sometimes pride prevents us from asking for help. We think we can solve everything by ourselves. But God designed life to be lived in community. Christian financial wisdom involves recognizing our limitations and seeking support when we need it. Good advice in time can save you years of struggle and failure. Because in the end, financial success is not just a matter of numbers, but of walking in the right direction with the right people by your side. The divine direction for finances is not just theory. They are practical principles that, when applied with faith and obedience, produce real results. God does not want His children to live under the oppression of debt or trapped in anxiety over money. He wants us to prosper, not only materially but spiritually, with peace and purpose. Each of the 7 biblical principles for prospering that we have shared here are more than simple tips. They are spiritual keys that open doors of blessing. Remember the story of Joseph, who worked with diligence and was elevated to a position of honor, or the widow who obeyed the prophet Elisha and saw how her scarcity was transformed into abundance. These accounts are not ancient tales. They are living examples of what God can do when we apply His wisdom in our lives. But it all begins with one step: to obey and trust. Do not forget to write in the comments, "I live in gratitude, and God prospers my finances." By doing so, you not only interact with the community, but declare with faith a spiritual reality over your life. Also, if you need prayer, leave your request in the comments. We believe that God listens and responds to those who cry out with a sincere heart. Don't miss the video, How to Invest Your Money According to Biblical Principles, where you will discover practical strategies based on the Scriptures to multiply your resources wisely and effectively. It is the perfect complement to this message. If this content has been a blessing to you, Do not forget to subscribe to the channel, activate the notifications, leave your like, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this teaching. May God bless you in all areas of your life. May He give you peace, wisdom, and prosperity in abundance. Until the next video, and may the favor of God accompany you always.